To show a quick overview of how our communities tool on the website works. I'm currently at thestaranthem.com/cg, and this is the entire communities tool. So it's a kind of drawer function um, tool that allows people to sign up for groups. And what this does is shows a group here, shows when it meets, where it's meeting, just enough information for them to essentially know a bit about the group, and then they can initiate to join that community, in which case they put in their first name, last name, a phone number, and an email address. So it's super lightweight, really easy to facilitate the connection. And our goal here in developing this whole entire thing was to connect people interested in groups with the leaders, all the while protecting the privacy of where that group meets. We can give away generalizations such as an area of town, but telling them the exact address had some people, it just made it pretty difficult for some of that stuff. Some of them have kids, some of them don't. But we ended up pulling that functionality out of it, and anybody that is published to the website allows kids. So that's kind of some of the logic behind it. Just so you guys know the fields, we've got essentially a title, a day, a time of day, so this is actually two fields, then an area, and then I've also got, most of them don't have it, but somebody in this one wrote it. So this is Jed and Jamie Benoit. They actually have a little bit of just background to who they are, and the goal with this was to just make it a little bit more personal. We've had trouble getting some of the information from the rest of the groups, and they change over so much that this hasn't really been an issue, but these guys have just stayed the same, so we just left it in there. But yeah, so as far as the user is concerned, this is the full interaction. It's supposed to be really lightweight, really easy. This could get developed further in the future, but for right now it works perfectly, and they just submit. And then I want to show you guys kind of how this is populated, how it's built, as well as show you a little bit more about some of the thought process behind the communication flow following up behind this thing. So to jump over into CCB, the way these two are connected is we have actually developed an API call inside of WordPress that is then calling over to CCB. It's accessing the groups inside of the Department of Communities over here. So CCB has this entire groups thing. We're also broken up into two campuses. So we have Hayden Campus and Coeur d'Alene Campus. So if you see a group here, such as Jed and Jamie Benoit, let's go with that. And no group was found. That's super weird. We know that that group exists because there. It's probably because they're in the Coeur d'Alene campus. And if I search Jed, there he is right there. So Jed and Jamie. So one of the things that I just want to explain here is essentially what's happening is these groups are getting loaded into a specific department. They're being created, and that this plugin that we've developed has looked to find anything within that department that has a specific box checked on it. And the way that it works, once we kind of get into the actual group creation, it'll walk you through how to actually publish to the website. And we kind of leverage CCB's ability to publish to its little group publish area. And we hijack that information and move it into a little bit more pretty presentation over here. So as you can tell, there's some of these that have different names. Some of them are just like Joe and Kate Zubeli, whereas this is like Mark Luno, men only. So the way that this part functions is this is the group title. So if I was going to go into this group, and you have to have admin privileges to do this, but if I'm going to go into this group and just edit the group settings, this is where all of the functionality happens to be able to publish it to this. So Jed and Jamie Benoit, this is actually the area where that information is coming in. So you can see it in the description spot right there. When we go to type, we want to set them to a community group, and then childcare available. This used to actually initiate another column that said kids yes, but we don't even use that anymore because everybody here allows kids in their groups, or they sort that out with them later. But one thing to keep in mind is we do want this database to be as effective as possible. So if they do allow childcare, just make sure to check them there. Something maybe to point out really quickly, so there are groups within our communities department that are not on this site. My wife and I actually lead a community downtown right now, and it's made up of 4 or 5 couples, and we usually actually do most of our, if you call it like recruiting or inviting or anything like that, we handle that really at a campus level. And so we both tend to build relationship with the people down there, and we feel like if we can meet them face to face, that's an easier way for us to leverage inviting people into our community. But this is just another tool for that, and for a lot of new timers, this is great. So, but just to kind of clarify, there are groups that are here that aren't here, and so we'll show you kind of why that or how that works. So the when and where. If we're going to look at Judd and Jamie, so Tuesday evening, downtown CDA. So these areas are all built up already, and so you'll want to make sure that these are tagged correctly. Sometimes you'll run into the issue of maybe a group that meets at several different houses, and they might be at Midtown CDA one week, and then they're at downtown, and I would say I would default that back towards the campus, and so you don't want to select the campuses in this. This is a location thing for a different plugin, but any of these areas. So if the main bulk of their community group hubs out of Hayden, then I would put Hayden on it, because this is looked at as somebody that's a new user to this form. They don't know anybody sometimes, or they're just looking for who's close by to me or who are people in my neighborhood, and that's the whole goal with it. Maybe 1 week out of the month they're gonna have to drive downtown to Coeur d'Alene. But for the bulk of it, they're going to be in Hayden, and so I would say default to whatever the kind of larger zone of people come from. So we don't need any of this other information in here. This is all just extra stuff. If you need to move them to a different campus, then you can do that through this little palette right here. But whatever campus you're inside of, when you hit Create Group, it's going to build it there. So make sure it's at the right campus. We try and tag each community to either Coeur d'Alene or Hayden specifically. As we go into options, this is kind of the area where all of this stuff comes in. So we want to make sure that it's a members interact group. This has to do with some functionality within CCB, and we want to open that up. Invitation or request required, that's totally fine. Some of these things can differ from group to group, but for the most part, those aren't deal breakers. This is actually where this stuff happens. So if listed is checked, this only affects it for anybody who has a CCB login, so they might be able to see this group inside of CCB. So if I click on like the groups area, these groups are all listed. If it was unlisted, then it's going to disable. Now it's an unlisted group, so it's kind of incognito. It's in the background. Those could be groups such as maybe our stewards or something like that. Nobody else really needs to see what's going on inside of those groups. But public search, this is the one where it publishes to our website. So as you check this box, it'll show up here as long as this admin thing is set to communities. So we've got 2 different departments that use this plugin. We've got communities and youth. And both of these push to different areas of the website. So if I actually come over here and go to youth, you'll notice a really similar plugin. It looks exactly the same, but it's only using high school girls, high school guys, girls, guys, middle school, and they're set to different areas. And so with this in mind, you'll want to keep this really checked and balanced here. So if I don't tag this to communities in the admin panel of department, then it won't send it to this page. If I don't tag it to youth, then it won't send it to this page. That's the only way that these things look at it. Those actually even define who some of the notifications go to. So as far as all this stuff down here, I would reference any other community group in that department as far as how this stuff gets checked. Attendance groupings, different things like that. You guys can all default back to whoever is running Church Community Builder at the time on staff. They should be able to help you out with how this goes. But All that we really care about for the website side of things is that this is set to communities, the title is put in correctly, that this public search is checked, and then the when and where and area of town. So as you can see, those are the pieces that we're grabbing there. That's the big important stuff. So if I cancel out of this and I'm going just back into Jed and Jamie's group, what happens when a user clicks this and fills out this information? That is a very, very good question. So as you can see, we've got participants inside of this group. If you go here, there's the leadership of it. So you've got Chris Laurie as the director. Chris is set up as the director of the entire department for communities. Jackson is assigned as the coach for this specific community. Jed is the leader of this community. And then even though it says leader right here, when we actually go into participants, you'll see that Nathan Robertson is set up as an assistant leader. And that is something important. So if we go in here to participants, maybe even like group actions, edit participant list, you can see there's Chris as the director, there's Jackson as a coach, Jamie is a group member, Jed is the main group leader, and Nathan is the assistant leader. And I want to talk about roles for a second in this. I'm going to jump over to a little thing I have here. So we've got this user form submission. So somebody submits the form on the website and boom, they create this. So now they've got this submission, and what we've done is essentially created 4 separate emails that go out and respond to the specific people that have the right contextual information for that specific thing. So the user actually ends up, once they submit it, they get another email that comes back to them and says, thank you for submitting. If you want to find out more about communities, email us by just replying to this email. And it actually sends back to an email that's just cg@thisisouranthem.com. And so it opens up a line between us as a staff and the person as the user. This is a great tool just in case if nothing happens down in this area, that this at least is available. So it gives the user a second reach if they need to, if they have a further question or if they need more things or maybe they have a special situation. We're going to keep that in mind. But I want to talk about kind of what these areas are down here. So as you can see, assistant leader is red, and the relationship here is really specific. But we're going to get to those guys in just one second. The director is always the same for every department. So in the department of communities, so in the CG department, our director is Chris Laurie, currently. And in our youth department, our director is Levi, currently. So as that department is checked into a different person, then this person gets the email or that person gets the email. And the director is kind of a different role. So if you think about the director, they're getting the overview, the full snapshot of the group. So they want to know who the user is that reached in, who coaches it, who's the leader, who's the assistant leader, all this kind of stuff. But they're not really responsible for necessarily following up on anything. We just want to make sure that they're notified that somebody reached out. So that's pretty important. I just want to always keep them in the loop. So depending on what department is configured within that group, then the director gets an email or the youth director gets an email. As far as coach goes, so the coach is getting an individual email that says, please follow up with the leader at the next point in time. So our coaches generally, like my wife and I lead a community, and our coach meets with us once a month. So the goal would be that the coach could then bring this user submission form to that leader at the month and be like, hey, how was it following up with that person? Did you guys know? Like, were they able to get connected? What's going on with that? The idea is that they're really just checking in on them. And they don't necessarily need to be hounding them. It's probably going to depend on the relationship here. But in general, like for ours, if I was to use that as an example, Jason and Cameron Shadrick coach us, and they would probably just bring that to us at that monthly meeting and be like, hey, how did you guys follow up with them? Do you know if they got connected? how's it going? You know, and really it's the responsibility of these two people to make this main interaction back and forth here. So the coach has a reply to email that can go back to the leader if they respond to it. The director just has a reply to email, I believe, to the coach. But I actually have a document that outlines what each of these emails looks like, what the subject lines look like, all that kind of stuff. So I'll set a link to it in the description for this video and make sure that that's available for you guys to grab. The leader and assistant leader. So these two are very different in nature. I want to talk really quick about the assistant leader before I kind of jump into leader. So assistant leader doesn't have to exist. Assistant leader is essentially put in place as a communications person for that group. And I know it sounds kind of different when it says assistant leader, but when we're tagging these things inside of Church Community Builder, these are the only positions that we have to be able to grab. So we wanted to be able to name, I'll use my group again as an example because this is a great example. Usually I've been too busy to follow back up with new user forms. So like somebody wants to join our group, I'm probably not the best person to do it. I handle a ton of emails all day long, and I generally I'm not the quickest to get back to them, and we want to provide like the best experience possible to that person, get back to them as quick as we can. So my wife, on the other hand, is really, really good at just reaching right back out to people immediately. She's great at doing it. She's gifted at doing it. And so we have tagged her as the assistant leader. So what this does is it actually, if the assistant leader didn't exist, let's delete this for a second. This is the main interaction. So the user form goes out, and it's sent to the leader, and the leader is told to then respond back to the user. Now, if an assistant leader exists, then now all of a sudden, the main interaction goes to the assistant leader, and the assistant leader is the person who's supposed to respond to the user. So the leader is then notified that somebody reached out, but between them, they know that this person is the responsible party for the communication stuff. So end all is essentially if you have a leader that is really good at following up with the new people looking to join their group, then they can be there without an assistant leader. If you don't, then include the assistant leader. Put a person in place that is great with follow-up communication. Maybe they're planning the group text. They're kind of the main communications person for the group. Whereas this leader, a lot of times, is maybe the person who is pastorally leading the group or dealing more with the coach and how the spiritual life of the group is going. And this person's doing a lot of admin work. So sometimes it's the same person, sometimes it's not, and that's why this exists. So as we get back into here, if you're looking to tag anybody in here, you can change the coach, you can change the director, you can change any of this stuff over, but one of the things with the main leader, they have to be a part of the group. So like or actually you can add them in. So like if I wanted to be the main leader for this group, then boom, now I'm the main leader. Nathan and Jed are both assistant leaders. I'm not sure about having multiple ones in here. I wouldn't recommend it. I would say have one assistant leader, have one main group leader, keep it really simple, and make sure that it is straightforward. I know that's a lot to process, but the whole goal in this, I would hope that you guys kind of focus in on, is the fact that we want to connect people with the person who is the most pertinent. We also want to pass that information straight up the line and make sure that everybody's in the know as far as who's reaching out and that people aren't falling through the cracks. One of the main things here is to just have a lot of communication between the team, have a lot of knowledge of whose responsibility is what, and continue forward and make sure that we do a good job in stewarding our communities. So that's the goal.